Imagine it's 1987. You're sitting in a sidewalk cafe in Milan, watching the world go by. The espresso is perfect. The fashion is outrageous. The hair is even more outrageous. And everywhere you look, people are spending money like there's no tomorrow. Armani suits, Alfa Romeo convertibles, gold jewelry that could fund a small country. This is Il Sorpasso, the overtaking. Italy just became the 5th largest economy on earth, leapfrogging over the United Kingdom. The Italians are celebrating like they just won the World Cup. Again, you order another espresso. You pay with a wad of lira notes so thick it barely fits in your wallet. The bills feel like monopoly money, colorful and almost comically large. But nobody cares because everyone is getting rich. The factories in Turin are humming. The fashion houses in Milan are conquering Paris. The banks are lending to anyone with a pulse. You lean back in your chair, light up a cigarette because it's the 80 seconds, and why not? And you think to yourself, this party is never going to end. Cut to 2025. That party didn't just end. The police showed up, shut down the music, arrested the DJ, and bulldozed the entire building. Italy isn't just slowing down, it has completely flatlined. While America's economy has roughly doubled since 2000, while Germany has grown steadily, while even Spain recovered from its 2008 crisis, Italy's GDP per capita is frozen in time. We're talking about the same level of wealth per person that existed when The Matrix was in theaters, when people still used floppy disks, when Nokia was the coolest phone company on the planet. This isn't a recession. Recessions end. This is something far more sinister. This is economic stagnation so severe, so prolonged, that an entire generation of Italians has never experienced real growth in their lifetimes. Young people who graduated college in 2005 are now middle-aged, and their salaries in real terms haven't budged. It's like the entire country is stuck in a time loop, reliving the same economic nightmare year after year after year. But here's the part that should terrify you. This disaster wasn't caused by bad luck. It wasn't caused by a natural disaster, or a war, or a plague. The seeds of Italy's collapse were planted during those golden years, during the Champagne and Armani era, when everyone thought the good times would last forever. Italy is suffering from a very specific addiction, an addiction to a ghost called the lira. Today, we're going to perform an autopsy on what used to be one of the world's great economies. We're going to cut open the corpse, examine the organs, and figure out exactly what killed the patient. And trust me, what we find is going to be disturbing, because Italy's curse isn't unique. The patterns we're about to uncover, the mistakes, the denial, the slow-motion suicide, these same forces are quietly at work in economies around the world right now, including yours. Welcome to the death of the Italian miracle. Let's begin the dissection. 1. The currency drug, or how Italy got hooked on fake competitiveness. And I use the word succeeded with massive air quotes and a very skeptical look on my face. Because Italy's economic miracle from the 1,960 seconds through the 1,990 seconds wasn't built on innovation or efficiency or superior technology. It was built on a printing press, and not the kind that prints newspapers. Here's how the Italian miracle actually worked. Picture this. You own a textile factory in Prato, a mid-sized city in Tuscany. You make shirts, nice shirts, Italian craftsmanship. But you're competing against a guy named Klaus in Germany. Klaus just invested 10 million Deutschmarks in state-of-the-art automated looms. His shirts now cost 30% less to produce than yours, and they're higher quality because robots don't get tired or hung over. You're sweating. You can't compete with Klaus on quality. You can't compete on efficiency. Your factory is still using equipment from the 1,970 seconds. Your workers take 2-hour lunch breaks and a month off in August. So, what do? Do you invest in new technology? Do you retrain your workforce? Do you streamline your operations? Nope. You pick up the phone and call your cousin in Rome who works at the Bank of Italy. You explain the situation. Klaus is killing you. The trade deficit is widening. Italian shirts are losing market share. And like clockwork, the government springs into action, not by helping you modernize, by devaluing the lira. Overnight, the lira loses 15% of its value against the Deutschmark. Your costs haven't changed. Your shirts are the exact same quality. But suddenly, To a buyer in New York or Paris or Tokyo, Italian shirts are 15% cheaper, not because you made them better, not because you became more efficient, but because your currency is now worth less. Your money is garbage, so your products look like a bargain. This was the competitive devaluation strategy, and Italy rode this horse for 40 years. It was the country's favorite economic drug, and they were completely addicted. Every time Italian exports started to struggle, every time German or Japanese competitors got ahead, Italy would just devalue again. It was the economic equivalent of a student who never studies, but keeps cheating off the smart kids test. It works in the short term, but you never actually learn anything. And here's the dark side of that drug. When you devalue your currency, you're not just making your exports cheaper, you're making everything you import more expensive. And Italy imports a lot: oil, natural gas, raw materials, computer chips. All of that just got 15% more expensive in lira terms, so prices go up, inflation spikes. The cost of living jumps. Italian workers notice their groceries cost more. Their gas costs more. Their rent costs more. So they demand higher wages. And Italy, being Italy, actually had a law that automatically raised wages when inflation went up. It was called the scala mobile, the escalator. Sounds great, right? Your paycheck automatically keeps up with the cost of living. What could go wrong? Everything. Everything could go wrong. Here's what actually happened. The government devalues the lira to help exporters. That causes inflation. The scala mobile kicks in and raises everyone's wages. Now businesses have higher labor costs, so their profit margins shrink. So they cry to the government for help. And the government, you guessed it, devalues the lira again, rinse and repeat, over and over and over. By the early 1992, the lira was a joke. Inflation was running at double digits. The currency was collapsing so fast that Italian tourists traveling abroad had to bring suitcases full of cash just to pay for a hotel room. In 1992, during the European currency crisis, partly thanks to George Soros and his hedge fund shorting the lira into oblivion, the Italian currency imploded. It fell out of the European exchange rate mechanism. The government was forced to let it freefall. But then something happened that changed everything. In 1999, Italy joined the euro. And this is where the story gets really dark. Imagine you take a guy who's been addicted to painkillers for 40 years. A guy who relies on those pills just to get out of bed in the morning. A guy whose entire life is built around that addiction. And one day, you walk into his house, find his stash, and flush every single pill down the toilet. No rehab. No tapering off. Just cold turkey. Good luck, buddy. Figure it out. That is exactly what happened when Italy adopted the euro. They lost the ability to devalue. The printing press was gone. Suddenly, Italian textile factories had to compete with German engineering firms based on actual efficiency, based on actual quality, based on actual productivity. And guess what? They couldn't, because they had spent 40 years cheating. They never built the muscles needed for real competition. They were flabby, weak, and completely unprepared. When the euro locked the exchange rate, the curtain fell. Italy stood naked on the European stage, and the global market wasn't impressed. This is the curse of the lira. It's the phantom limb pain of an entire economy reaching for a lever that isn't there anymore. And that pain, that withdrawal, is still killing them 25 years later. 2. The productivity flatline, or why Italian businesses refuse to grow up. Surely they looked at the new reality and said, all right, time to get serious. Time to invest in technology. Time to scale up. Time to compete like adults. Nope. This is where we encounter the Peter Pan syndrome of Italian capitalism. The refusal to grow up. Let me hit you with a number that should make your jaw drop. Since Italy joined the euro in 1999, total factor productivity, which is economists speak for how efficiently an economy uses its workers and capital, has been flat. Actually, it's worse than flat. In some sectors, it has declined. While German workers were getting more productive every year, while French companies were automating and innovating, Italian businesses just froze. They stopped evolving. It's like the entire country decided in 1999 that they had learned enough and didn't need to improve anymore. Why? Welcome to the world of Italian small business. Italy is famous for its family-run companies. You know the vibe. The charming little leather shop in Florence, run by the same family for 3 generations. The ceramic studio in Sicily, where the grandfather still hand-paints every piece. It's romantic. It's artisanal. It's Instagram gold. And in the modern global economy, it's a death sentence. Over 90% of Italian businesses have fewer than 10 employees. These aren't just small businesses. These are micro-businesses. We're talking about companies where the org chart is dad as CEO, mom as accountant, the eldest son as sales manager, and 2 cousins doing everything else. Here's the brutal truth about companies that small. They don't innovate. They can't. If you're running a 5-person operation, you're not going to drop €5 million on an AI-powered supply chain system. You're not hiring McKinsey consultants to optimize your operations. You're not investing in R&D. You're just trying to make enough money to keep the lights on and take August off for vacation like every other Italian business. This is the dwarfism of Italian capitalism. Companies that are too small to compete globally, too small to achieve economies of scale, too small to invest in the future. But why do they stay small? Is it culture? Is it just that Italians love working with family? No, it's rational behavior. The Italian government actively punishes companies for growing. Imagine you're an Italian entrepreneur. You have 14 employees. Business is good. You want to hire a 15th person to keep up with demand. Stop right there. Don't do it. In Italy, once you cross the threshold of 15 employees, you enter a bureaucratic nightmare. Labor protection laws that were dormant suddenly activate like landmines. It becomes nearly impossible to fire anyone, even if they're incompetent or stealing from you. Union representation requirements kick in. The paperwork triples. The legal liability explodes. So, what do? You don't hire the 15th employee. Or you hire them off the books, paying them in cash. Or you split your company into 2 separate entities of 7 employees each, both technically independent but actually controlled by you, just to stay under the radar. This keeps Italian companies artificially small. And small companies can't compete with giants. You can't export to China when you can only produce 1,000 units a year. You can't negotiate with Walmart when you're a family of 5 people. You can't afford to modernize when you're living paycheck to paycheck. And here's the kicker: management by bloodline. In the US or the UK, when a family business gets big enough, the founder usually steps aside and brings in a professional CEO. Someone with an MBA, someone with experience scaling companies, someone who actually knows what they're doing. In Italy, the business gets passed from father to son, or occasionally to daughter, if she's lucky, and her brothers are useless. It doesn't matter if the son is brilliant or if he's an idiot who'd rather be surfing in Sardinia. He gets the job because he's the eldest. This dynastic management system is rampant in Italy. Studies have shown that Italian firms run by the founder's eldest child perform significantly worse than those run by professional managers. But tradition is tradition. The son inherits the factory whether he's qualified or not. So you have millions of tiny companies, terrified of growing because the government will crush them with regulations, run by people who got their jobs through birth rather than merit, unable to invest in technology because they have no capital. And then economists look at Italy and say, gee, I wonder why productivity hasn't moved in 25 years. While the rest of the world was building Amazon and Google and Samsung, Italy was doubling down on Giovanni's artisanal leather belt workshop. And while Giovanni makes a beautiful belt, truly world-class craftsmanship, he cannot carry a G7 economy on his back. 3. The demographic death spiral, or how Italy is disappearing. You need consumers to buy things. You need young people to innovate and take risks and start companies. Italy is running out of people. Let's take a little trip. You've probably seen those viral news stories. Buy a house in rural Sicily for €1. Sounds like a dream, right? You imagine yourself renovating a rustic villa, sipping wine under an olive tree, living the good life. But stop and ask yourself, why is the house €1? Why is the mayor of a small Italian village literally giving away real estate? It's not charity, it's desperation. The previous owner died. Their children moved to Milan or London 20 years ago and never came back. There is no one left in the village to buy the house. No young families looking for a starter home. No retirees looking to downsize. The village is dying. These aren't real estate opportunities. They're tombstones. Italy has one of the lowest birth rates on planet Earth. To keep a population stable, you need a fertility rate of 2.1 children per woman. That's the replacement rate. Italy is currently sitting at 1.2 children per woman. They're not just shrinking, they're evaporating. Last year, Italy recorded fewer births than at any point since the country was unified in 1861. Think about that. Fewer babies born in modern, wealthy, peaceful Italy than during World War I, when half the young men were dying in trenches and the Spanish flu was killing millions. Fewer babies than during the depths of the Great Depression. Fewer babies than during the fascist dictatorship. It's a demographic catastrophe. This creates what economists call an inverted pyramid. In a healthy economy, you have a large base of young workers supporting a small peak of retirees. Picture a pyramid, stable, strong. In Italy, flip that pyramid upside down. You have a huge, swelling mass of elderly people balanced precariously on top of a tiny, shrinking base of young workers. This leads directly to the pension bomb. Italy spends nearly 17% of its entire GDP on pensions. That's the second highest in the developed world, right after Greece, which tells you everything you need to know about the company Italy is keeping. Every year, the government has to take billions of euros, money that could be spent on schools or infrastructure or tax cuts or literally anything productive, and dump it into pension checks for retirees. And here's the political poison. The elderly are the largest voting bloc in Italy. No politician dares touch their pensions. It would be electoral suicide. So instead, you get policies like Quota 100, introduced a few years ago, which actually allowed people to retire earlier. In a country that's rapidly aging and desperate for workers, the government paid people to stop working sooner. It's economic insanity. But it makes perfect political sense when half your voters are over 60. This creates a vicious cycle. Taxes on young workers are crushing because they have to pay for the old. Because taxes are so high and salaries are so low thanks to that productivity flatline, young couples can't afford to buy a house. They can't afford to have kids. So they don't have kids. Which makes the demographic crisis worse, which means even higher taxes on the next generation. It's a snake eating its own tail, and the snake is dying of old age. When you walk through small Italian towns, you don't feel the energy of the future. You feel the weight of the past. Everywhere you look, there are old people sitting in cafes, walking slowly through piazzas. The future, the young people, they're gone. Italy is becoming a gigantic open-air museum, beautiful, historic, full of culture, and economically dead. 4. The bureaucratic inferno, where dreams go to die in triplicate. I speak Italian. I love the culture. Let's do this. Welcome to hell. Actually, hell might be easier, because at least in hell, the rules are clear. In Italy, you're entering a bureaucratic labyrinth designed by Kafka on a bad day. The World Bank ranks countries on ease of doing business. For years, Italy has ranked shockingly low, often falling behind places like Rwanda, Azerbaijan, and Kazakhstan. Let that sink in. It is easier to start and run a business in Kazakhstan than in the birthplace of the Renaissance. Let me give you a specific, painful example. The Italian civil justice system. Imagine you own a small business. You deliver 100,000 euros worth of goods to a client. The client receives the goods, inspects them, says everything looks great, and then simply refuses to pay. They ghost you. No phone calls, no emails, nothing. In Germany or the UK, you take them to court. The process takes a few months. The judge looks at the contract, sees the signed delivery receipts, bangs the gavel, and orders the sheriff to collect your money. Case closed. In Italy, you better clear your schedule for the next few years. The average time to resolve a commercial dispute in Italy is over 1,000 days. That's nearly 3 years. And that's just the average. If the other party has a good lawyer who knows how to exploit the appeal system, it can drag on for a decade. If you're a small business, you can't survive 3 years without that 100,000 euros. You go bankrupt waiting for justice. This creates a culture of non-compliance. Bad actors know the system is broken. They know they can screw you over and face zero consequences, because by the time the court forces them to pay, you'll be out of business. It's a legal system that rewards criminals and punishes honest people. But it's not just the courts. It's the sheer weight of regulations. Italy has an estimated 150,000 laws currently on the books. For comparison, France has around 7,000. Germany has about 5,000. Italy has 150,000. It's a legal jungle so dense that even the regulators don't know what's legal anymore. Here's a recent example. The Italian government introduced something called the super bonus, a program to stimulate the economy by giving massive tax credits for home renovations. Great idea in theory. But the rules governing the program changed over 30 times in 2 years. Architects couldn't figure out what paperwork to file. Banks didn't know which projects qualified. Construction companies were paralyzed. One day the forms were blue. The next day they were red. The next day the program was canceled. The next day it was back, but only for certain types of buildings. The next day the tax credit was 110%. The next day it was 70%. Chaos. Complete chaos. This uncertainty is economic poison. Imagine you're Tesla or Apple and you're thinking about building a factory in Europe. You look at Italy. Skilled workforce? Check. Great location? Check. But it takes 5 years to get the permits. You can't fire incompetent workers. If a supplier rips you off, the courts won't help you for a decade, and the regulations might change tomorrow. Why would you choose Italy when you could build the same factory in Poland or Ireland or Spain with a tenth of the headache? You wouldn't. And they don't. Italy misses out on billions of euros in foreign investment every single year, not because the country isn't attractive, but because the state is unworkable. The bureaucracy isn't just annoying, it's a tax on time. And in the modern economy, speed is everything. If you're slow, you die. Italy is moving at the speed of a sloth, swimming through molasses. 5. The brain drain, or how Italy exports its future for free. We have a dying population. We have a government that makes doing business nearly impossible. If you're a smart, ambitious 5-year-old Italian with a degree in engineering or computer science, what do? You leave. You pack your bags, buy a plane ticket, and get the hell out. This is la fuga dei cervelli, the flight of brains, the brain drain. And it's perhaps the most heartbreaking part of this entire tragedy. Italy has a world-class education system. Their high schools are rigorous. Their universities produce brilliant engineers, economists, doctors, and scientists. The Italian government spends hundreds of thousands of euros educating each student. Free health care, subsidized tuition, excellent professors. And then, the moment these kids graduate and are ready to become productive, tax-paying citizens, Italy loses them. They move to Germany, to the UK, to the United States. Italy spent decades investing in their education and then hands them to foreign countries for free. It's the worst trade deal in economic history. Italy exports human capital and imports nothing in return. Why are they leaving? Let's run the numbers. An entry-level software engineer in Rome makes about 30,000 euros a year. That same engineer moves to Berlin or Dublin and immediately makes 60,000 to 70,000 euros, double the salary for the exact same skills. But it's not just about money. It's about the gerontocracy. Italian workplaces are run by old people who refuse to retire and refuse to promote young talent. You don't get promoted because you're good. You get promoted because you've been there for 20 years. You're supposed to wait your turn, sit quietly, don't make waves, and maybe, if you're lucky, you'll get a decent position when you're 45 years old. Young Italians are tired of it. They're tired of being treated like children. They're tired of watching incompetent bosses keep their jobs through connections while brilliant young colleagues get nowhere, so they leave. There's a dark joke among Italian expats in London. What do you call an Italian with a PhD in physics? A barista at a cafe in Soho. Except the physicist probably isn't a barista. They're probably working at a hedge fund in Canary Wharf or a research lab at Cambridge, making 10 times what they would have made in Italy. The statistics are brutal. Over the past decade, nearly 1 million Italians have emigrated. And these aren't retirees looking for sunshine. These are young, educated, mobile professionals, the best and the brightest. When the smartest people leave, innovation leaves with them. You lose the people who start companies. You lose the people who file patents. You lose the people who push for change. And here's the truly insidious part. This brain drain acts as a safety valve for the Italian government. If all these angry, unemployed young people stayed in Italy, there might be protests. There might be a revolution. There might be demands for real change. But instead, They just buy a one-way ticket to Berlin. The pressure is released. The old guard stays in power. The rot continues undisturbed. Italy is bleeding out its future, one boarding pass at a time. 6. The North-South divide, or how half the country drags down the other half. Highways, factories, cities, wealth. If northern Italy were its own country, it would be one of the richest places in Europe, rivaling Bavaria or Switzerland. Now, scroll your eyes south, past Rome, past Naples. Down into the Mezzogiorno, the land of the midday sun. The lights get dimmer, the roads get worse, the economy vanishes. This is the southern question, la questione meridionale. It's the oldest wound in Italian history, and it's infected. The GDP per capita in southern Italy is roughly half that of the north. We're not talking about a small regional difference like California versus Mississippi. We're talking about Germany versus Morocco, existing inside the same country, using the same currency, governed by the same laws. Why is the South so poor? It's easy to blame the mafia. And we will, because they're a huge part of the problem. But it's deeper than that. It's infrastructure. For decades, Italy has promised to build modern highways and high-speed rail to connect the South to the rest of Europe. But the projects either never start or they turn into legendary disasters. Take the Salerno-Reggio Calabria Highway. This road became a national joke because it took over 50 years to complete, 50 years to build a highway. Imagine trying to run a logistics company from Calabria when your trucks are stuck on one-lane roads that were paved during the disco era. You can't. So businesses don't invest there. Then there's the mafia tax. In regions like Sicily, Calabria, and Campania, organized crime isn't just a movie, it's an economic reality. Small businesses pay the pizzo, protection money, to the local mob. It's a percentage of your revenue, paid every month, just for the privilege of staying in business. This is an invisible tax that crushes profitability and scares away outside investment. Who wants to open a factory in Naples if the Camorra is going to show up demanding a cut of your profits and threatening to burn the place down if you refuse? But the real tragedy is the dependency trap. Because the private sector in the South is so weak, the government became the employer of last resort. In some southern provinces, over half the workforce is employed by the public sector. Municipal clerks, forest rangers, administrators of programs that don't really do anything. The jobs exist not because they're needed, but because politicians hand them out to voters who keep them in power. It's a clientelistic system. You vote for me, I give your cousin a job at the post office. The North deeply resents this. The factories of Lombardy feel like they're being taxed into oblivion to subsidize what they see as a lazy, corrupt South that refuses to help itself. This resentment fuels political movements like the Northern League, which at one point literally advocated for splitting the country in two. Until Italy figures out how to make the South productive, how to integrate it into the modern economy, the country is running a race on one leg, and you can't win a marathon hopping. 7. The debt trap, living on borrowed time. It's a number so stupidly large that the human brain can't process it. So let's make it real. Imagine every single person in Italy, the newborn baby in the hospital, the kid eating gelato in Venice, the grandmother in Sicily, the businessman in Milan. Every single one of them wakes up this morning with 48,000 euros of debt strapped to their chest. Debt they didn't ask for, debt they can never escape, debt that will be passed on to their children. This debt is the chain that binds everything. Remember when I said Italy needs to invest in infrastructure, needs to fix the courts, needs to modernize schools? They can't. They're broke. Every year, Italy pays roughly 90 billion euros just in interest on the debt, not paying down the principal. Just paying rent on money they spent decades ago? That 90 billion is dead money. It's not building hospitals. It's not funding startups. It's not lowering taxes. It's just disappearing into the void, into the hands of bondholders in Frankfurt and New York and Tokyo. And this makes Italy incredibly fragile. They live at the mercy of something called the spread. The spread is the difference between the interest rate on safe German bonds and risky Italian bonds. When investors get nervous, maybe because of a pandemic or a war or a stupid comment by an Italian politician, they sell Italian debt. The interest rate spikes. And if that rate gets too high, Italy can't afford the payments. The country goes bankrupt. This almost happened in 2011. Italy was on the brink of default. The entire Eurozone was about to collapse. The European Central Bank had to step in with Mario Draghi's famous "whatever it takes" speech to save the currency. But here's the terrifying reality. Italy is too big to fail, but also too big to save. Greece was small. The EU could bail out Greece. Italy is the third largest economy in the Eurozone. If Italy defaults, there's not enough money in Europe to save them. It would trigger a financial apocalypse that would make 2008 look like a minor hiccup. It would likely destroy the euro and shatter the European Union. So Italy is trapped in a zombie state. They can't spend their way out because of the debt. They can't grow their way out because of all the other problems we've discussed. They're just drifting, refinancing their loans, praying that interest rates stay low, hoping that the next crisis doesn't push them over the edge. It's a high-wire act with no safety net, performed by an acrobat who's getting older and slower every single day. Final thoughts. Can the patient be saved? So is this it? Is Italy doomed to become a poor country with rich architecture? A theme park for tourists, inhabited by waiters and tour guides, preserving the memory of a time when they built empires? I know this has been heavy. We've dissected the currency addiction, the productivity collapse, the demographic catastrophe, the bureaucratic nightmare, the brain drain, the north-south chasm, and the mountain of debt. It looks terminal. But here's the thing. Italy has shocked the world before. This is a country that rose from the literal ashes of World War II, cities bombed to rubble, economy destroyed, and became an industrial powerhouse within 20 years. This is a country with enormous private wealth. Italians are brilliant savers, even if their government is a disaster. This is a global superpower in fashion, design, food, and culture. The Made in Italy brand is still one of the most valuable assets on earth. To survive, though, Italy needs a revolution, not a violent one, but a cultural and political revolution. They need to shatter the gerontocracy and let young people lead. They need to take a flamethrower to the bureaucracy and build a government that actually works. They need to stop protecting dying family businesses and start encouraging companies that can compete globally. They need to turn the South from a welfare dependent into an economic engine. It's a tall order. It requires reforms so painful that no politician wants to touch them because they'll lose the next election. But the alternative is what we're watching right now. The slow, comfortable slide into irrelevance, the Disneyfication of an entire peninsula. A beautiful open-air museum where nothing is made and nothing changes, forever frozen in amber. The choice is Italy's, but the clock is ticking. And honestly, the alarm has been ringing for 25 years. At some point, you have to wake up. What do you think? Can Italy turn this around? Or is the curse of the lira permanent? If you're Italian, I want to hear from you. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me about the innovation happening on the ground that gives you hope. Or tell me I'm right and share your story of why you left. Drop a comment. Let's talk about it. And if you made it this far through this economic autopsy, hit that like button. It helps the algorithm, which ironically is probably the only thing in Italy growing faster than the national debt. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.